Hello, dear viewers, and happy Halloween. Hopefully, if I've managed my time correctly and this video is coming out when I expect it to. It's actually August when I'm filming this, so I have no idea. Regardless, the spooky season is upon us, which means it's time to spend weeks on a needlessly elaborate costume that I will almost certainly never wear after this video because I'm far too old for trick-or-treating and have poor social engagements, as do most of my friends, so I will almost certainly not be attending any Halloween soirees. I can't wait. My vision for this ensemble is that of a celestial witch with a magical pointed hat that contains the very cosmos in its brim. Let's get into it. So my design for this project has a sort of dark academia vibe with a lot of whimsical, wizardy elements mixed in. I've taken some inspiration from historical fashion, but there is a high level of just fantasy nonsense as well. My plan is to make the base pieces, the skirt and the blouse, fairly simple. At least simple for me. There will still be copious amounts of ruffles, so I can wear them more in my everyday life and get some actual use out of them. And then just go crazy with the accessories. I want to do a beaded waist corset belt thing, some starry shoes, a sheer cloak that I want to dye several colors to kind of look like the tail of a comet, and of course the hat. The hat is kind of what inspired this whole design. I want to do a lot of beading and embroidery with constellations on the outside and add like chains and charms and flowers and stuff to trim it all out. But the whole big gimmick for this thing is on the underside of the brim. I want to put in an infinity mirror with LEDs so it looks like a portal into space that's just on my head. I'll go more into detail on that and how I plan to achieve that effect. But for now, I'm going to start off working on the skirt. Okay, so for the skirt, you saw in my little illustration that I'm going to be doing like a ruffly, fluffy skirt. So my plan for the skirt is basically a circle skirt, but with a few fun additions. I'm going to do cutout sections along the bottom hem that are like arches, like someone took a bite out of the edge of the skirt, and then fill that in with a gathered ruffly piece. You saw the illustration. I've been seeing some designs kind of like this on Pinterest. I'll link my Pinterest board for this project down below if you want to see things I've been looking at to get inspiration for this. I've already done a little bit of a mock-up sample for the skirt, just one quadrant. I'm going to do a full gathered circle skirt, so gathered at the waistband and then have this. I tried a new method for the gathering. Someone left a comment on my bed skirt dress video because I was complaining about having to do all the gathering in that dress, and they suggested a method that they had learned where you do a zigzag stitch over top of dental floss was what they suggested. I don't have a ton of dental floss actually, but I do have a ton of crochet lace yarn. I figured that would be a decent substitute. I initially thought I was gonna have to wax it with beeswax, but when I did the sample I didn't bother waxing it and it worked just fine. Yeah, I just did one row of the zigzag over the cord and it worked out decently. I'm gonna do 2 rows when I do the final piece because it makes your gathers more even and easier to sew down. So yeah, thank you to person who left that comment. Very helpful, very useful. The fabric that I'm using for the skirt is a blue bedsheet that I got from the thrift store. This is a full circle skirt, which does use up a lot of material, but I'm gonna do it, I guess like a gourd skirt, so not a circle skirt. I'm gonna cut it in 4 segments, just to make it a little bit easier and to make it easier to put in pockets, because I'm gonna put pockets in the skirt. Okay, that's it. So I have my very professionally made pattern pieces that I put together when I did the mock-up for the cutout in the bottom of the skirt, and then for the gathered portion that fills that space in. Very professional, very professional. So first I'm going to cut out my pattern pieces. First I'm going to eat lunch because I can feel my bones dissolving. That I'm gonna eat lunch and then I'm gonna cut out my pattern pieces. Okay. Okay, so I've cut out the main skirt panels, and I started laying out the pattern pieces for the inset ruffle arch things, and I just didn't have enough material to make it work with the sheet that I was using. But luckily, I have a second bed sheet. They are slightly different colors, slightly different shades of blue, but it's not super off, and I think the two-tone will look interesting. That's what I'm gonna tell myself. I've got the main panels of the skirt cut out. I cut out the ruffle pieces, and then the pieces for the pockets and the waistband. And I want to try something new with the waistband. I'll talk about that more a little later. I have an idea for that. I don't know how well it's gonna work, but only one way to find out. For the ruffles on the skirt, I wanted to do a rolled hem, but I didn't have a rolled hem foot, so I found this tutorial online that was very helpful. It involved a lot of pressing and sewing and cutting and pressing again and sewing again, which was tedious, but it worked out really well. "28 feet. A rolled hem. And now we ruffle it." Okay, so the skirt is all assembled, and I let it hang for a few days just to let it warp out because it's cut on the bias. Yes, I did hem the bottom edge, so I'm going to have to level it off at the waistband. It doesn't seem to have warped very much at all, and with this design that I made, a little bit of warping isn't super noticeable, so I'm not too stressed about it. So the last thing to do is to make sure it's all level and then do the waistband. And for the waistband, I want to try something I haven't done before. I swear there's a name for this, and I've seen it somewhere, but I cannot remember it. If you know what it is, let me know in the comments. But what I want to do is have elastic just at the sides of my waist and leave it flat in the front and in the back, so I get a clean look on the front and back. Because yes, with the final design I have planned, I'm going to have a Swiss waist belt thing on the front, so you're not going to see the waistband of the skirt anyways, but I do want to be able to wear this without the Swiss waist belt thing, so I want the waistband to look nice. So what I have right now are 2 pieces of canvas and 2 pieces of elastic. So what I'm going to do is basically sew these in a ring so that the canvas folds over the elastic, and I'll stitch it down so it'll be solid, secure in the front, and have some stretch at the waist. And I think these 2 sections of elastic will be enough to get enough stretch to get it on. I mean, hopefully. So I'm not going to bear the lead here. This process did not work. I'm not going to bother explaining what I'm doing here because it was not good. It didn't work at all. Don't pay attention. Ignore this. Okay, so my plan for the waistband did not work at all. Didn't fit, didn't stretch enough. So I gave up for like a full day, and then tried looking up what I was trying to do and immediately found a very helpful tutorial. We'll link that down below. That explains how to do what I was trying to do correctly. I was on the right track. With this tutorial, it's gonna be flat just in the front, not at the front and back. I think that's a better idea. It gives it more elastic, more ability to stretch and fit over my butt. But what she does is she does interfacing on the front section of the waistband and then leaves the back uninterfaced and just leave little gaps on either sides of the front section. And then I will take my elastic and feed that through and stitch it down at the ends of the front section, and there will be elastic in the back of the skirt, and the skirt will be done. So I'm going to do the rest of that, and then I guess the next thing I'm gonna work on is the shirt, ? Which I have not thought enough about given how complicated my design is. So that should be fun. Okay, so I made a mock-up, or most of a mock-up of the shirt. I'm pretty happy with it so far. It is giving both Reputation Taylor Swift bodysuit, but also like deranged kindergarten teacher, and also clown, which like is a vibe, honestly. It's pulling in a weird way because I only have the one sleeve, and this ruffle is pretty heavy in terms of like fabric, so it's kind of like pulling the collar this way, and it's kind of like slightly choking, but not bad enough for me to care. I need to make a couple adjustments. I think I need to make the arm side a little bit bigger. It's just a little tight. This ruffle is too much. Shocking for me to say, but it's too much. This is actually the ruffle off of my mock-up for the skirt. I ripped it off to be able to use the other pattern piece as a pattern piece to cut out my actual fabric, but it's too dense for what I want, so I'm gonna go with something a little bit smaller. I need to make some more tweaks to the fit on the sides. It's a little tight over the hips, so just widen it there. I need to figure out how I'm gonna do the cuff because I don't want to put blue tape on my final shirt. I also need to make modifications to the front because I want to do pin tucks along here, going like diagonally from like the shoulder arm side to the center. So I need to figure out that. That requires math. So I think before I do that, I'm gonna eat a donut. I honestly really like this shirt with the polka dots. Like, it's kind of a look. It's kind of, with the polka dots, deranged kindergarten teacher's kind of the vibe now, unfortunately. So I did some calculations to figure out how much more material I would need for the front panels of my shirt, and then added that extra length in by just straight up taping fabric into my pattern piece. It worked, all I can say. And then I was able to cut out all my pattern pieces. I started constructing my shirt by marking and stitching down my pin tucks. I trimmed down the center edges of the front panels to make sure that everything was nice and even, and then I stitched on the button bands, and then sewing the shoulders with a French seam. Next I stitched on the collar by machine, and then finished the inside edge by hand. Don't have my mic, so apologies for audio. The collar's kind of whack. But yeah, the collar's too loose. Like, there's a lot of space. I don't want it to be, like, choking, but, like, this is kind of bonkers. I don't know how this happened. I don't know if I care. I'm thinking of, like, finishing it and putting the sleeves on it and then deciding if it bothers me. Because, like, in the final look for this video, I'll have a necktie scarf thing, so you won't be able to see this, but I do want to be able to wear this daily, so I'll put the sleeves on and see how I feel about this. It'll be a real pain in the ass to put the collar on once the sleeves are on, because they're big and ruffly, and so yeah. I guess I'm doing the sleeves. Yeah. It's 30 seconds later. I tried pinning the shoulder seam back a little bit more, and it fits way better. That's all I need to do. So I'll mess with this more to make sure it sits nicely. I really should put the buttonholes in before I do the sleeves, but I really don't want to do buttonholes right now. I compromised by doing the buttonholes entirely off camera, but I did record me sewing up the side seams in excruciating detail. And then I moved on to the sleeves. I figure you guys had seen enough gathering after the skirt, so I did the shoulder and wrist gathering off camera. Then I attached the cuffs to the wrist of the sleeve. For closures on the cuffs, I added buttons and little loops of elastic. I made the shoulder ruffles very similarly to the ruffles on the skirt, and then attached it and the sleeve itself to the arm side of the shirt. I finished the raw edges with some bias binding, and then it was time to move on to the belt. Okay, so the base pieces are done, so now it is time to move on to the fun, sparkly, pretty things. So the first accessory that I want to do is the belt Swiss waist thing. I've already done a quick little mock-up, just a single layer of fabric just to make sure I get the shape right. The big thing that's going to take a lot of time with this is the embroidery. So I want the main outer layer of this to be this velour velvet stuff that I got from the thrift store, but the problem with this is it's kind of light. It's kind of a similar tone as the skirt, and I want it to be a darker blue so it'll stand out more on the belt, so I need to dye it. But the other thing is I want to do the hat out of the same fabric in the same dyed color. So I want to dye all the pieces together so they end up being the same color. So in order to do that, I need to figure out how much of this fabric I actually need to dye for the hat, because I don't think I can fit all of this into my dye pot. So in order to do that, I need to pattern out my hat. So I need to figure out how much fabric I'll need for the hat and the belt before I can start dyeing and then going to the embroidery. So before we start the belt, we have to have a brief hat patterning interlude. So I roughly cut some fabric to be enough for my pattern pieces, and then moved on to the dyeing process, which I filmed none of other than this one very important shot. But it all came out really nicely in the end. For the belt portion, I applied some iron-on interfacing to the back of the fabric, and then marked out my design. I decided to do the central moon as a separate applique beaded piece, so I cut out the shape out of some gold velvet that I had on hand, and then stitched that to some tulle and began beading. Once I had finished beading all of the area that would be visible in the final design, I cut it out of the tulle and stitched it onto the belt fabric. I decided to make the clouds using French knots, similar to how I made the moss embroidery on my moss corset. This method worked out really well. It just took a while because this yarn was so chonky. Okay, so I done one of the clouds in the French knot method, and I love the way it came out, so I'm going to put this in a bigger embroidery hoop so I can work on the entire design without having to move the hoop around, and continue filling in the clouds with the same method. The French knot method made this texture that was just so puffy and chunky, and I really loved it. So I went ahead and filled in the rest of the clouds and the design, and then I was able to move on to the rest of the beading. With the beading and embroidery done, I cut out 2 layers of cotton, cut and stitched in some boning channels, and then bag lined the beaded layer with the cotton, leaving the bottom edge open so I could turn it right side out, and then insert the boning, and then finished off the open edge with some hand sewing. Then it was time to insert grommets along the back edge, and with that the belt was done, and it was time to move on to the hat. So the next thing I want to work on is the hat, and as I said before, this is where things get technologically complicated. So basically what I want to do with the hat is put an infinity mirror in the brim, and if you don't know what an infinity mirror is, basically what it is you have a regular mirror, and then lights, and then a semi-transparent mirror. So the light source in between the two reflects back and forth. So you get this kind of portal effect where it looks like the light is continuing further back than what is physically possible. So the way I plan to do this is with this mirror film. This is like a privacy film that I got online. I'll try to link it below. I did buy it a while ago, so I don't know if I'll be able to find it, but so my plan is to have 2 layers of this with a bit of a gap in between in the brim, and then just LED fairy lights in between, kind of studded around to look like stars. But before I can get to using this stuff and all the illusion stuff, I need to build the base of the hat. As you saw earlier, I already patterned out my hat, so the next step is to cut out the base pieces. I've been planning on doing this in felt. I've got 2 different kinds. I've got the regular acrylic craft felt that's very soft and floppy. I plan to use this for the cone, but I also have the stiffened felt, which is stiffer. So let's get to working on the hat. Pattern pieces that I drafted earlier didn't quite fit on my felt sheets, so I had to do a little bit of Frankensteining to get everything to fit, but that's okay because Frankenstein's like a spooky monster, so that's on theme. I joined the pieces just by doing a zigzag stitch across both edges and then reinforcing the whole thing with some interfacing. I had to do some more piecing with the brim, but once I had everything assembled, I was able to do a quick try on, and everything fit perfectly. Okay, so I have the base of the hat made. I'm keeping it separate as the top and the brim, just to make construction easier, because I'm gonna have to do a lot of trial and error with the brim to get the mirror effect to work. So that is what I'm working on next. So I talked about this transparent mirror film that I have. So basically I need to have a layer of this applied to the felt, and then another layer sitting above that with a gap in between where the lights will sit. This stuff is not gonna stick to the felt nicely. I could glue it, but then you would be able to see the dried glue underneath, and that will kind of mess with the effect. and also it can't sit as a layer on its own because it's very thin. It's made to stick to glass. It's a privacy film. It clings on with water. So what I need is a layer of something thin and clear that I can stick this to and then create my 2 mirror layers for the hat. So I have a few different options for that. My first thought was acetate. I have some Duralar left over from my screen printing class days in college. This stuff is just clear film. This is just acetate. It's thin, cleared film. This piece is all cut up, but you can see it would be this size. This would work really well, but these sheets are really small, and I don't have very much left of this stuff. So there would be not enough to make 2 layers of the brim. Luckily, I also have a bigger pad of acetate. I thought this was perfect. This will be great. For some reason, this stuff is way thinner. For some reason, this stuff is not sturdy. It does not keep its shape like the other smaller sheets. It's some sort of different brand or type, I don't know. I bought it a while back for a different project that I ended up not doing. So, hi buddy. Oh, we're attacking the foot. Ow! So, the acetate, it's kind of out. And I was like, what do I do? What can I use? And then I remembered I have laminator sheets. I'm just gonna melt some empty laminator sheets. I've done some tests. They look kind of crazy because I don't actually have a laminator. Why do I have laminator sheets and a laminator? Excellent question. First, I've been doing them with an iron, just sandwiching them between 2 layers of fabric and ironing them. They do get really bubbly like this, but I think that'll be okay. The warping and the bubbling of the laminate sheets was just too intense. It messed with the light and the reflection too much. So I just switched back to the big acetate sheets. I taped together acetate sheets to make a piece big enough to trace out my brim and then cut out 2 layers. I used rubbing alcohol to remove the tracing lines and to clean the acetate in preparation for the mirror film application. To apply the film, I sprayed the acetate with water and then laid the film on top. I used a scraper tool to work all of the water out, but I was concerned that the film wouldn't cling to the acetate as well as I wanted it to. So I tried to use an iron to kind of melt the 2 layers together. I tried this near the middle of the brim at first in case it ruined the effect. It would be close to my head and hard to see on the final piece. It kind of worked. It attached the 2 layers for sure, but it did create more warping. Then I trimmed away the excess mirror film around the edge, which I didn't film, so here's a dramatic reenactment. I used more clear packing tape around the edge of the brim just to really seal that edge and make sure that the 2 layers wouldn't separate, and then I hand stitched the first mirror layer to the felt layer of the brim. Okay, so my solar panel donut is done. I went in and added these pieces of felt. It's just a long strip folded in half to give it a bit more sturdiness, so that when I put the other mirror circle on top of this, there's a little bit of space in between, which is important for the infinity mirror effect. So the next step is going to be adding the lights. So I have a couple packs of these just little battery operated fairy lights. I did not realize when I got them how big the battery pack was. I've put LED lights into projects before, and those battery packs are usually like the size of a thumb drive. They're not that big, they're really thin. They use the little round like coin batteries. These use 3 AAAs, and I think I'm gonna end up needing at least 2 of these, if not 3. So I need to figure out how to hide these. They're pretty heavy. It's 3 AA's. So I fear I can't just like make pockets in the side of the cone. Maybe I can. I don't know. I'll have to see. This is why I left them unattached, because I'm not sure how I'm going to do the batteries. If I can just make like pockets on the inside of the cone part that I can stick them into and not make the cone decone, then I'll do that. If not, I don't know. We'll figure it out. But for now, I'm attaching these lights. So my plan is to just kind of arrange them out in a way that looks nice and then just stitch them down. Nothing fancy. So I'm just gonna stitch the lights down into place, and this is really horrifying to look into. Worst funhouse mirror. So I started arranging the lights and taping them into place, and this meant I was able to get a little sneak peek of the infinity mirror effect for the first time. Once I had all the lights laid out the way I wanted, I went in and hand sewed them into place. And then I hand sewed on the second layer of mirror film. Okay, so I have my holographic donut finished. All of the lights are sewn down. I got both layers of the mirror sewn down. So now I need to figure out what I'm doing with these. So my initial plan was to put pockets on the inside of the cone of the hat. I don't think that's really gonna work. These are pretty large and pretty heavy, and they need to sit pretty high up in the cone to fit, and the weight kind of crumples the cone, and I don't want to have to add more structure to this. So plan B is to construct a sort of Juliet cap is the closest thing I can think of. I'm sure there's a better name for it, but like a little crisscross headpiece thing that these can attach to, that can be attached to the brim, and then I can attach the cone to all of that. I added some snaps to my battery pack holding structure and to the bottom inside edge of the cone so I could attach and detach the two pieces easily. Then it was time to mark out my beading pattern. I wanted to do some constellations, so I printed out some designs and punched out holes where the stars would go, and then used that as a template to mark out my beading and embroidery. For the constellations, I used gold embroidery floss, and then more of the gold beads that I used on the belt to make the stars. Since I was doing such long stitches of the embroidery floss, it didn't want to sit nicely, it tended to buckle and pucker, so I used regular sewing thread to kind of sew over the lines and couch them down. When the beading and embroidery were done, I hand-stitched up the seam on the side of the cone, since I didn't want to risk breaking the needle on my machine by hitting one of the beads. So I've started some of the beading and embroidery for the brim of the hat, and I realized I've never actually talked about what I was embroidering onto this. So I'm doing stars and constellations. I'm doing a mix of real constellations and made-up ones. Like here I have Constellation Virgo and Constellation Corvus, and then a random little star and a sea. Those aren't real ones. I made those up. I basically made a selection of a handful of real constellations that I liked, that I wanted to include, and then added some made-up shapes to kind of fill in the space, and then I'm adding individual beads as individual stars. And I'm doing kind of like a gradient with the density of the beads so that they're really close together along the very edge, and they get more spread out as they go in towards the hat. And then a similar thing with the cone, where at the very tip they're very dense and then they get more spread out as you go down. Also, like, general disclaimer, I think there's like some different versions of constellations. I'm not the most educated on astronomy, but specifically with Virgo, I saw a couple different configurations, like the same star cluster, but then people would draw the lines in between them differently. But like the lines aren't real, they're just connecting the dots. So the most common version of this constellation I saw was more like a box with legs, but I did find a few sources that had it more like this, where it looks like a stick figure, and I'm a Virgo, and I want to not be a box. I finished the cone the other day, and I have it on my dress form with the rest of the costume, so she looks it's like a magical dunce cap, and I love it very much. October 1st. I intend on posting this video on or just before Halloween. Dramatic pause for you to check the pub date and see how accurate that statement was. A little bit of dramatic irony for us all. I am very close to being done with the beading and embroidery on the hat brim. I've got these 2 little chunks left, and then I can move on with attaching it to the brim structure and then putting a cone on it and then doing all the trimming. So theoretically I have 30 days to finish the hat, do the whole cloak, and do the shoes. So I still need time to edit the video, so realistically it's more like 3 weeks, 2.5. So I think that's enough time to finish everything I want to do, but I need to like focus, need to lock in, so let's get to it. So the brim is done. So the next step is to cut out the center ring. I can't see what I'm pointing to. So the next step is to cut out the center portion and attach it to the brim structure. And then the next thing I'm gonna work on is the hat band. I've got this gold satin that I bought initially for the cravat ascot bow. I've been trying to do research on that. I'm still not sure what the difference is. I'm just gonna call it a bow, and I'm gonna use the same material for the hat band. And I'm hoping I can make that removable, same as the cone, so I can store this easier. I'm not totally sure how that's gonna work with the flowers, because I have a bunch of fake flowers. There was a sale at Michael's, don't judge me. So I'll have to mess around and see what I can do with that, if I can make it all one cohesive unit that can be added and removed via snaps. But before that, I have to cut out this hole. So I guess I'll do that. All right then. The edges of the satin by machine and then secured the pleats in by hand. I ended up sewing the band directly to the cone of the hat and then making the flowers removable with snaps. So I started arranging all of my flowers and then secured them to a scrap of fabric with hot glue. Okay, so the hat base is done. The embroidery and beading are done. The flowers are on. The hat band ribbon thing is on. It is time to add the trinkets and the charms. I currently have the hat just off screen. I don't want to readjust the camera to be able to show you that, but it's here. I'm using my bedside lamp as a hat stand because I don't have one. So it is finally time to add all the sparkly dangly charmy bits. So before I do all that, I want to go through everything I have, and I'm going to do a trinket haul for you guys. So this is my bag of random jewelry I've been amassing for like a year. I've got, you know, assorted talismans, what every girl needs. They're just like little stars and moons. They don't have, like hoops, so I don't know how I'm going to attach them. But they have positive energy, so they have that at least. Got more little star charms. I got this thing. This is not going on the hat, but look, it's like nice little like starburst design, super cute, but it's also a little locket. I don't know what I want to put into it. I really want it to be like a compass or something, or like a pocket watch, but I don't know how to make those yet. I've got some thrift store necklaces. This one is so cool for this project. And then I got this beefy boy necklace that is just like 10 different strands of chain all knotted together for like $1 or something. This quantity of chain from the craft store new would be so expensive, and that's why thrift stores are wonderful. It is sticky, but you know, gift horse mouth. You know what I mean. Once I had finished hand sewing on all of the chains and charms, the hat was done. Okay, so the hat is finally done. Now I'm going to move on to the cape. So in my design, I kind of plan to do kind of a double layered thing with a shorter capelet and then a longer underlayer. My initial plan for the capelet was to do the same blue velour that I did for the belt and the hat. And you're probably going, Amelia, you didn't dye any fabric for that. Well, that's because that was my plan initially, but I changed my mind because I found this fabric. I got it as like a remnant at Joann's or something, but it's this really pretty like not shot silk, it's definitely not silk, but this like two-toned but iridescent kind of material. It's got this like metallic bluey purple along the warp, and then this kind of a mossy peacock kind of green on the weft, so it makes this really pretty kind of like magical blue color. So I plan on using that for the capelet and kind of interlining it with some of the leftover fabric that I used for the skirt just to give it a bit more body. And then for the under cape, I've got this stuff, which is kind of this like sheer crinkled gauze. And what I want to do for this is I want it to kind of resemble the trail of a comet, is kind of the vibe that I'm going for. Not like an actual real comet, but like a cute fantasy pretty one. I want to do like a kind of like a pastel tie-dye kind of thing. Yeah, that didn't work out. I had this whole plan for how I was going to dye this polyester fabric in multicolored. I was going to use like an iron to heat set the dye because I read online that would work, and I did all these samples and tests and none of them came out very good. I was going for the little glowing star children from the end of Howl's Moving Castle, and I got the paper towel you end up with after dyeing Easter eggs. So in the end I just went with the plain white fabric. So then I moved on to the capelet. I cut out the shape and then marked out my embroidery pattern, and I flatlined it with some cotton and started working in the same gold metallic embroidery floss I used on the hat. I wanted to do a series of concentric circles, kind of like a solar system diagram that radiated out from the center of my back. At this point, I realized I had a lot of hand sewing in front of me, but I was going to be doing most of the sewing for the cravat on my sewing machine, which needs electricity, which I had reason to believe I would not have access to for a while. So I started on the cravat. I did a little midnight patterning to figure out the dimensions of my rectangle, because that's literally all this is. It's just a rectangle. Then I cut out my rectangle out of my gold satin, which involved a sneaker for some reason, and then stitched up that long seam using the wonderful, wonderful power of my electric sewing machine, turned that right side out, and finished the ends with a little hand sewing. I also hand sewed a few pleats along the very center where it would sit at the back of my neck, and that was it. That was the cravat. Since this section is so short, here's some pictures of my cat. And then we didn't even lose power during the storm, which was good because that meant when I went back to the hand sewing, I got to do it with lights and air conditioning. So I finished all the embroidery and ironed out the creases from the hoop, and then I laid out my capelet to arrange and then sew on a bunch of little round buttons that looked like planets in the solar system. And then I baglined the piece with some more cotton, and then I was able to turn out and press my celestial manta ray. I added a trim along the edge by doing a blanket stitch with some more of that gold embroidery floss, and then just doing a round of single crochets into that. And then I finished off the neck edge with a little bit of binding made out of that same gold satin, and then I added a closure using 2 gold buttons and a loop of elastic. And then I moved back to the undercape. I was very lazy with this because this fabric doesn't fray, and I honestly feel like I'll probably just take it off of the cloak and use it to make something else in the future. So I didn't bother hemming anything, I just gathered the top edge and then whip stitched it to the capelet. And with that, the full look is finally done, and it is time for the reveal. Came out. It is very warm, so I will be doing this a bit quickly. The hat is probably the biggest, I don't want to say disappointment, but disappointment. It came out looking very cool, like aesthetically almost perfect. The brim is a bit floppier than I kind of intended. The flowers are much heavier than I expected, so they're kind of weighing that down and causing some issues, and there is definitely some warping in the film. I kind of made sure that the front of the hat had the least warping, but like in the back it's pretty crinkly. I'm sure there are better materials I could have used, better process that would have had less wrinkling in the final product, but I didn't do that. So the main problem though is it's heavy and it kind of hurts to wear. These lights with these battery packs were not a good idea. I really should have used the kind that have the little tiny battery packs that use the little coin batteries, not 3 AAAs. 3 packs of 3 AAAs. So there's 9 batteries on my head, and they really want to slide back. So I keep having to like push the hat forward, which is pushing my hair in my eyes, and I'm sweaty. I'm taking the hat off, okay? Next, I'm going to talk about the cloak, because I also want to take that off. It's super cute. Love it. Embroidery is adorable. Fabric, magic, shimmery glory. I love it. I'm so happy. I'm not even mad that the dye on the undercape didn't work out. I think the white honestly works a lot better. I think the multicolored would have been much harder to achieve something that like worked well with the color palette. So I think staying with just the plain white was the best move. I'm gonna take that off because oh my god. Yeah, the rest of the outfit is super cute. I love the skirt. It's very swooshy. Very swooshy. The shirt is honestly the warping issues I was having. Now that I'm wearing it for the first time fully, it's fine. It's not a problem. The bow really does cover a lot, but even without that, it's not too bad. The cravat, it's a rectangle. The belt, I love it so much. I need to make sure I get a better shot of it, but it's so pretty. This embroidery here, this beading, I want to chew on it. I want to chew on it and eat it. Crunch it between my teeth, which is a bad idea because I think I need to get a wisdom tooth removed. But that is it. Thank you for watching. Happy Halloween. This project has been 2.5 months in the making. Thank you for watching and following along in the process, and thank you to everyone who has subscribed recently. There are a lot of you. So hello, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to me ramble about the things I like to make. I hope you stick around. If you are not subscribed, if you feel so inclined, you can push that button. I would love to have you. Please like the video if you liked it. I think that does something, I've been told. I've got some other projects planned, at least one more, hopefully before the end of the year. And then a bunch of other cool stuff planned for next year. Oh my god, my jaw hurts. I really need to get that tooth pulled. Ow. So thank you for watching. Have a wonderful Halloween, and I will see you next time. Goodbye! Maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's Duracell.